It's 2 p.m. on Tuesday, September 23rd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we are following at this hour. The U.S. has begun massive airstrikes on Islamic State militants in Syria. Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are among the allies taking part. It's official. With the signing of Korea and Canada's bilateral free trade pact, the two countries elevate their ties to a strategic partnership. And a discussion regarding North Korea's human rights abuses is set to be held in New York on Tuesday. Pyongyang says it wants to join the meeting. And our top story this afternoon, the U.S. has begun airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Syria. This marks an escalation in the U.S.-led efforts to counter what Washington declared as global terror threat. For the latest, we connect live to ARIRANG's Kim Hyun-bin at the news center. So Hyun-bin, the Pentagon has confirmed the airstrikes a few hours ago.
Yes, Pyongyang announced that the U.S. and its allies had launched airstrikes in and around the Syrian city of Raqqa, which is a stronghold for the IS militants. Pentagon Press Secretary Rear Admiral John Kirby said fighter and bomber jets were used in the initial onslaught, including Tomahawk missiles, to clear 20 IS targets. Now, these include buildings that are believed to be used as command and control headquarters for the militant group, as well as training and resupply centers. Aircraft from Arab nations such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar were also involved. The attack comes as part of U.S. President Barack Obama's pledge to degrade and destroy the Islamic State. Now, around two-thirds of the militant group's 30,000 forces are based in Syria, while the rest are scattered throughout large parts of northern Iraq. And for the last several weeks, the U.S. has conducted surveillance flights over the region, collecting intelligence for use in these airstrikes. Now, according to U.S. Central Command, the United States has launched 190 airstrikes in Iraq since August, but these represent the first in Syria. Now, earlier today, Hadi Barra, a leader of Syria's main opposition group, called to initiate immediate U.S. airstrikes to, quote, avert catastrophe. Nonetheless, this is shaping up to be an intense several hours of an aerial onslaught in Syria.
All right, thank you, Hyun-bin, for the updates. We will continue to monitor the situation and bring further updates as they come. Now, on to President Park Geun-hye's state trip to Canada. Seoul signed a free trade agreement with Ottawa on Monday, local time there. But as our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun reports, that wasn't the only deal sealed between the two nations.
9 years after launching trade negotiations, Korea and Canada signed their free trade agreement on Monday.
FTA 효과가 교역, 투자 분야를 넘어 기술 협력, 인적 교류, 민간 경제 협력 등 제반 분야로 파급이 돼서 양국의 경제 협력이 한 단계 도약할 수 있도록.
With the FTA signing, President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Stephen Harper elevated their relations to a strategic partnership, placing a greater emphasis on their political and economic cooperation and mutual trust. Seoul and Ottawa set global peace and co-prosperity as their shared goals. The two partnering nations sealed a number of other deals to increase cross-sharing of advanced technologies. For instance, Korea will offer up its know-how in IT-based new energy industries, such as the smart grid and energy storage systems, in return for Canada's shale gas and oil sands exploration and development technologies.
We pushed for a memorandum of understanding to expand from cooperation in our strong clean energy technology to that of Canada's oil technology.
President Park and Prime Minister Harper will also expand their working holiday program to encourage more people-to-people exchanges. The Korean president also secured Ottawa's support for her North Korea policies. President Park is now in New York to carry out multilateral diplomacy at the United Nations. At Tuesday's UN Climate Summit, she will speak about building a growth engine out of the global problem by converging IT with culture and other sectors in a creative economy. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, New York.
And a meeting on North Korea's human rights record will take place on the sidelines of that UN General Assembly on Tuesday, New York time. Pyongyang says it wishes to join the high-level talks, which will be chaired by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
A high-level meeting discussing North Korea's human rights violations will be held on Tuesday local time on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The meeting, which will be presided by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, will be attended by South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, as well as diplomats from the European Union and Japan. The dire human rights situation in Pyongyang has come under greater international attention this year following the release of a report by the UN Commission of Inquiry that accuses North Korea's leaders of widespread, systematic, and gross human rights violations. Kerry is expected to condemn North Korea's human rights abuses, focusing on its political prison camps, and he will also likely bring up the issue of the 3 Americans detained in the north. The meeting is aimed at garnering support for a UN resolution on the issue. Pyongyang is also asked to attend the meeting. The North Korean ambassador to the UN, Cha Sung-nam, said the North was waiting for an answer.
We told the U.S. that we will attend the talks. If the meeting is focused on North Korean issues, we should attend. We are waiting for an answer from Washington. If they really want to solve this issue through dialogue, we see no reason why they would turn us down.
However, the ambassador struck a more negative tone in regards to a potential meeting between the foreign ministers of the 2 Koreas on the sidelines of the UN gathering. He said talks should be held in Korea and not in a foreign country or international organization, as they are from the same country. North Korea sent its foreign minister Lee Soo-young and vice foreign minister to New York. Lee will address the General Assembly later this week. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Back here on the Korean Peninsula, South Korea has once again urged North Korea to come to talks rather than issue unilateral statements. This is in response to North Korea condemning the launch of anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border by South Korean civic activists on Sunday. The North issued a statement Monday calling the act a challenge to their efforts for improving inter-Korean relations. An official at Seoul's Unification Ministry clarified the South Korean government's stance again today, which is that all pending issues between the 2 Koreas, including the flying of those leaflets, can be resolved through dialogue. Meanwhile, North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly is set to meet later this week for the second time this year. The Legislative Assembly will begin on Thursday, and attention is on whether new reform measures will be introduced. Now, this as the regime has been reportedly introducing new economic policies that give more incentives to the working class. Also being watched is whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will attend the assembly meeting. He has not been seen at official events for about 3 weeks now, fueling speculation about possible health problems. In the year 2012, where Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The numbers from Apple's first weekend sales for the new iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are out, and they have topped last year's record set by the 5C and 5S models. Analysts say the tech giant will have more to celebrate when the new gadgets hit the Chinese market. Connie Kim reports.
Apple enthusiasts cheer in delight as they rush into an Apple store in New York to be the first to get their hands on the newly launched iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. One Apple fan holds up his prized new iPhone after camping out since early in the morning.
Big hands need a big phone. That's it, you know? No, actually, the better camera, longer battery life.
I'm most excited about the Apple Pay, be able to pay without having to take out my wallet.
Apple says it has smashed its sales record for an opening weekend of a new iPhone model, delivering 10 million iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in the first 3 days of sale. This tally beats the previous record set last year when Apple sold 9 million iPhone 5C and 5S. The record streak is expected to take another huge leap forward when the new iPhones hit the Chinese market, Apple's most lucrative market.
The U.S. tech giant's new handsets are reportedly being sold at up to 3 times the retail price in Beijing's black markets. The battle between Apple and Samsung will reach boiling point next week when the Korean firm rolls out its Galaxy Note 4 in Korea and the U.S. Meanwhile, local brokerage firms are slashing Samsung Electronics' third-quarter profit earnings, citing the firm's slowing smartphone business. Samsung Securities says it expects Samsung Electronics to post a third-quarter operating profit of $4.5 billion, down $1 billion from a projection made early this month. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of the Chinese market, the presence of Korea's Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors in the world's second biggest economy is expected to break a 9-year high this year. Industry sources say Hyundai and Kia sold over 1 million cars during the first 8 months of this year, with the combined market share standing at 10.6%. Now, that figure is the highest since 2005, when they accounted for 11% of Chinese market. With the automakers' newly released models, some analysts forecast they will surpass that mark this year, but others say it's too early to tell, as the Korean automakers still await China's approval on building 4 manufacturing plants in the country. The gender gap in Korean workplaces is narrowing. New data show that women in their 20s and 30s are more active economically these days. But as our Shin Se-min reports, there is still much to be done.
There are signs that Korean women are becoming a bigger part of the Korean workforce. Nearly 65% of women in their 20s were in their labor force by either having a job or actively seeking employment in the second quarter of this year. That's about 3 percentage points higher than the so-called labor participation rate for men in the age group, according to data released on Tuesday by Statistics Korea. Many women in their 30s drop out of workforce after they get married, but nearly 59% of them stayed in the labor market. It is the highest rate since 2000, when the data was first collected. The government has been seeking measures to address the gender gap in the Korean workplace, but a report from the Korean Women's Development Institute said the lag in economic participation rate of women had created roughly $192 billion in social costs over the past 13 years. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The government is going all out to cut the nation's smoking rate. In line with its push to almost double cigarette prices starting next year, it also unveiled a set of measures to inject tens of millions of dollars into public anti-smoking campaigns. Park Ji-won has the details.
Lee Jae-wook is one of many in the country who've decided to quit smoking before the cigarette price hike takes effect. He's used every method he knows to try and kick the habit, including gargling solutions and physical exercise.
I feel an urge to smoke again when I'm stressed out, or when I see people around me smoking.
Doctors say nicotine withdrawal symptoms are much more short-lived than most think, lasting only a few days, although it varies person to person.
Intense nicotine withdrawal symptoms generally last around 7 to 10 days, so it's important to endure and get through those first 10 days.
But that's easier said than done. To encourage smoking cessation and nip the addicted habit in the bud altogether, the Korean government has expanded its anti-smoking campaign budget for next year to $145 million. That's more than 13 times the $11 million allocated for 2014. About 35% of the budget will pay for anti-smoking programs targeting teens.
Currently, 25% of male high school seniors smoke. We will focus on anti-smoking campaigns for adolescents, as they represent the future of the nation's health.
To tackle the problem of young smokers, the government says it will implement anti-smoking education from elementary to high schools and teen counseling support centers nationwide. To stem the country's tobacco epidemic, the government plans to work with health and community centers to offer diverse anti-smoking services, even setting up special support programs to help all active soldiers. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And there's another goal the government is pushing for, and that's enriching the country with more cultural contents. That vision is apparently being reflected in next year's budget. The Culture Ministry says about $4.5 billion US, or that's about 1.3% of the total spending, will be used on the cultural sector in 2015. Now that's more than a 10% increase from this year's budget and represents the biggest boost among all ministries. The sports and contents industry will see the largest jump. And the Park Geun-hye administration has vowed to increase the annual cultural budget to an OECD average level of about 2% of total government spending by the year 2017. And as for how this year's budget is being used, here's an example. The Culture and Tourism Ministry will kickstart its Autumn Tourism Week later this week, and our Kwon So-ah reports that there are some discounts available for those who are planning on traveling around the country.
Most Koreans go on vacation during the summer, but the beautiful colors of autumn and perfect weather these days call for taking some days off and traveling around the country. And now may be the best time to plan a trip as the so-called 2014 Autumn Tourism Week kicks off at the end of this week. The campaign, introduced by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Korea Tourism Organization, runs from September 25th to October 5th. More than 3,700 tourism-related businesses are participating, offering lots of events and discounts that should lessen the financial burden on domestic travelers. They range from cheaper transportation and accommodation fees to food and event price cuts. Korea's state-run railway operator Korail and the nation's biggest express bus operator Kumo Bus Lines are offering discounts of up to 30% on tickets. Price reductions on gasoline at major tourist locations, for rental cars and room rates at 180 hotels will be slashed too. Not only that, Korea's ancient palaces and amusement parks can be enjoyed at discount prices.
We want to promote discounts at main tourism businesses to encourage people to take trips. We are taking into consideration people's time and financial restrictions, and we hope to boost the economy.
The 2014 Spring Tourism Week was launched earlier this year, but the project fell flat, largely due to April's ferry disaster that made people feel less inclined to travel. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
There's no denying that smartphones have become an essential part of our everyday lives. We use them as an extension of ourselves, and some even make movies with them. That's not a surprise anymore. Our Im Hyun-hee joins me for more on this trend. Good afternoon, Hyun-hee.
Good afternoon. Right, so nowadays here in Seoul, it seems like everywhere you go, you're running into people who are on their smartphones, either playing games, maybe looking at the subway map, or watching movies. But nowadays, like she said earlier, people are starting to make movies of their own with their smartphones, and there's one festival that takes place here in Korea that's leading the way. Take a look.
What begins with a simple chore of dusting off blankets quickly shifts to a scene with a much more sinister feel. All of this drama is captured in a 1-minute movie, filmed on a smartphone.
Movies are not that difficult. Even my life story can be made into a movie. So from a movie-loving perspective, this plan is an excellent idea and makes it easy to approach filmmaking.
And if 1 minute seems a bit long, there are even 6-second movies, all movies submitted to this year's 4th Olé International Smartphone Film Festival. How does an entire storyline fit into just 6 seconds of film? These amateur artists show that creativity is the key. Artists who come from 43 different countries and range in age from 10 to 70.
Since the movies are very short in length, people are less burdened and more encouraged to participate. Because you can make a movie with just one idea, we've seen many more submissions.
The festival has been garnering more and more attention worldwide with each passing year, as smartphones have been growing in capability as well. Whether it be 6 seconds or 10 minutes, now anyone with access to a smartphone can become a movie producer.
So our film critic Jason Bechervaise was here last week. He briefly talked about the festival. It's not only a festival, but it's also a competition.
Right. So the competition is the biggest part of this festival, and they actually did close the competition part earlier this year in July. And up until recently, they were with a judge of panels looking through the applications to pick a winner for the 9 different categories of the competition. And so it ranges anywhere from youth to categories such as humor, and it ranges from, like you saw, 10 minutes to 1 minute to even 6 seconds. Imagine making a 6-second movie.
And do we have this year's winners?
Yes, so they did announce the winners for this year, and they were very entertaining. They get a cash prize along with their show being screened at the Gangnam Megabox movie theater. But the winners this year, they ranged from movies from a vacuum cleaner, kind of gone a little bit scary, to a very cute, endearing one about strange dreams made by a very young applicant. And so very interesting accumulation of applicants this year, and so I highly recommend it. And you could actually check out all the winners on their website.
And I would imagine that it's not going to be easy for people like me to just start filming on your smartphone. Do they have like special applications that can help you achieve that, or even special courses that you can take?
So I would bet most people like you and myself, we don't know how to do this kind of movie editing. So they actually are offering an academy to teach people the basics of movie making, and that information you can find on their website as well. But another part of this festival that they are offering is the mentor and mentee program, and that actually is where they're pairing a very accomplished director with either a singer or actress. So this year they had Horan, a singer and actor, Pyongyang, and so they have a few different pairs, and they created different works, and you could find all of that online as well. And so very creative productions this year, and it is a growing festival. So keep your radar out for it for the next time.
Okay, so a festival that not only gives you prizes but also gives you lessons to teach you teach you how to make a movie out of a smartphone.
Really make use of your smartphone.
Okay, thank you very much, Uni, for today's report.
You're very welcome.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. We're having a cool fall weather today here in the capital with partly cloudy skies, as well as in Incheon where the Asian Games are being held. However, it's still hot outside with temperatures reaching up to 27 degrees today. Now, as for the rest of the nation, we can expect heavy rain due to the influence of Typhoon Fangwang. It's been raining slightly on Jeju Island, and that will expand to the Chungcheong-do provinces this afternoon and over the whole nation by tonight. Now, we are expecting a total of 200 millimeters in the mountainous regions of Jeju Island, and between 20 to 60 is expected in Seoul and the provinces of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do, while most of the remaining regions can expect up to 50 to 100. Now, going over to our temperature readings for today. Seoul will top out at 29 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will reach up to 26 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island will get up to 26 as well, while Dokdo and Mangkeungang is cooler at 24. Well, that's all for Korea. Now, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for you now. More news coming up in about an hour and a half time at 4 p.m. Korea time. I'll see you then.